Good afternoon. My name is John Schneller. I'm a former town councilor here in Bedford, and today I have the privilege of introducing current state representative Bart Fromuth, and he is currently a candidate also for state representative. Good to have you here, Bart.
Thanks for having me, John.
So, Bart, let's start right in and ask you why you're running again. This will be your third term if you're elected, and tell us why you're running.
Sure. Well, I've had two terms up there so far, as you know. This is my third go for state representative, and I feel strongly that while we've accomplished a lot, there's still more for us to get done up in Concord, and I'd very much like to be a part of that. So, you know, we've only had a Republican House, Senate, and governor for this one past term, and hopefully, with voters willing, we'll send our majorities and the governor back again for this term. So, interesting as my first term was up there, but working with Governor Hassan, it was a little bit of a logjam. But that's definitely changed under the guidance and leadership of Governor Sununu, and I'm looking forward to hopefully working with our House majority, our Senate majority, and Governor Sununu to bring more tax relief, to bring more funding for our roads and our schools, tackling the opioid crisis and things that matter to the Granite State. But number one and overall, and keep on reiterating this message everywhere I go, is the fact that the economy is rolling right now, and I credit the good works of the Republican leadership in Concord with at least staying out of the way of that. I think we've done a lot of stuff that's helped that along, but certainly one of the things you want to be mindful of is, when the economy's going in the right direction, wages are going up, unemployment's low, it's important for those representatives that you have in Concord or down in Washington, D.C. to do everything that they can to stay out of its way and not be an obstacle. So.
Great. So, Bart, you're also a husband. You have a great wife, two
Yep.
beautiful daughters, young ones, but they'll be going through the school system.
Yes.
You're also a businessman. You started your own business in partnership with your father.
Yep.
And that's a very successful business, profitable.
Yes.
So you're to be commended for that. And it's important that people in the town understand that you're very pro-business. Can you talk about some of the challenges, the difficulties you've had to try and continue with the pro-business environment, and maybe also talk about some of the successes you've had?
Well, certainly I like to classify myself as very pro-business. However, I'd say my real leanings in my heart is certainly with the small business owner, which we have a lot of here in Bedford. When I first actually teamed up with my father, it was there was just 3 of us in the company, and we've grown that to over 30 now. And I think one of the things that really stood out to me in our smaller days, and certainly we're still a smaller firm, mid-sized firm, one of the things that really stood out to me was the fact that it's really difficult getting the government out of your way in terms of prospering, knowing everything to do. I mean, now that we have 30 some odd employees, we have someone that manages our HR. There are things that we can deal with in terms of regulations and the strong arm of the government. We have people now that we've hired to deal with that full time, but when you're just a 3, 4, 5 person outfit, you're wearing multiple hats, and it can be very, very difficult to deal with the government at that point in time. You don't have an HR manager. You don't have someone that deals with compliance issues. And so that can be challenging, and a lot of our laws aren't written with the small business owner in mind, and that creates a lot of difficulties, and in some cases, in my opinion, it either disincentivizes folks from starting their own business, or it causes those businesses that they do start up to prematurely close. So one of the things I've been really focused on in my time in Concord is making sure that there's less regulation, less red tape for our small business owners, such that we're really giving them a glide path towards success, so that they can succeed or fail on their own merits, not with any assistance or help from the government. So.
Can you talk about some bills that you've sponsored that might talk about your assistance to small businesses, or just broadly?
Yeah, so one of the areas that I'm most passionate about, and it's not really a rallying cry area for a lot of folks, but I think certainly with the entrepreneurs out there, the folks that are business-minded, that want to become their own boss, a big issue that I find prevalent here in New Hampshire as well as without the country is this idea of occupational licensing. And, I'm a lawyer by trade. I understand the need to have lawyers get their license, pass the bar. I understand the need for doctors to get their medical training past the boards. But when we get into cutting hair, becoming a tattoo artist, even selling door to door hawkers and peddlers. Things like that are still written into our law such that you need to go through really a significant amount of red tape, pay a lot of money before your business can even get off the ground. And despite the fact that we're a small state in terms of population, only 1.3 million, New Hampshire has more occupational licenses than the state of California. That's something that, really we shouldn't be comfortable with. I think it disincentivizes folks from getting into the business. And some of my strongest critics for my efforts to repeal occupational licensing are the folks that are actually already in business themselves. They, fairly or unfairly use these licensing restrictions as a means to keep out competition. And I think especially for our poorest communities, our most economically challenged residents of the state, occupational licensing can be a real barrier for these folks to hang up their own shingle and succeed here in the state of New Hampshire. So that's been a big push for me. And it is gaining traction, and it is a bipartisan issue. It was one of the things actually that I found myself to be most in agreement with. President Obama, his administration put out a lot of memos and documents on their position having to do with occupational licensing. And I think President Trump, for his part, it's obviously not a priority, but it's something that I think Republicans are coming around on. And I hope that continues, and I want to be part of that effort.
That's great. So I know you've cut taxes in the under Republican leadership, you've cut taxes twice.
Yes.
In the last 2 terms. What are your plans for a 3rd term? Why should we send you back to Concord?
Well, I think a big area for success for us has been the tax cuts. And one of the things that I disagree with some of my Democrat friends, and I do call them friends because I have many Democrats on the other side of the aisle that I have a very, very good time with, and it's not always as nasty as it seems on cable news. I can promise you that, especially up at the New Hampshire State House. But one of the things that my Democrat friends were very, very wrong about, and I feel that the Republicans were very, very right about, was the fact that if we cut the taxes on the business side with the BET and the BPT, one of the byproducts of that is going to be more businesses moving to New Hampshire, and the state revenue is actually going up because we're spurring economic growth. And that's exactly what's happened. Governor Hassan, in her final term in office as governor, said that our initial tax cuts, which in my opinion were really a mosquito bite, it was a step in the right direction, but they were over a 6-year period, so very, very small reductions. She said that those tax cuts would cause a chasm in terms of our state budget and blow a $90 million hole. Well, the exact opposite has been true. Revenues have gone up consistently, and we've just accelerated that revenue growth with additional tax cuts that we put in this past term. So I hope once again, if elected, to join my Republican friends in the majorities and bring more tax relief to businesses as well as homeowners here in the state of New Hampshire.
Great. Now, you talked a little about having friends on the other side of the aisle, and
yeah.
I think most of us, if not all of us, that are tuned into one cable station or another, just saw the debacle that went on. It doesn't matter which side of the aisle you're on. I think everybody thought that was not how our lawmakers should conduct business. Could you just give us your thoughts on what went on with Kavanaugh and what you do to stay on this side of civility, if you will?
Well, I think in terms of our national discourse, I think something's been lost. The idea that we're all Americans, that we're all on the same team. We might have differences that can be pretty stark politically on the direction that the country should go in. But the point remains is that, there are going to be times when we have Democrat presidents with Republican Senates and Republican presidents with Democrat Senates. And these are, really the purview per the Constitution of the President of the United States to make the recommendation. Just because you don't like the president does not mean, in my opinion, that you take the whole system down with you to thwart the president's duty in nominating someone for the Supreme Court. That being said, I think, it was unfortunate how everything unraveled. If the Democrats had Dr. Blasey Ford's information for over 60 days or 6 weeks, or I think the timeline might have been, then it was really incumbent upon them to bring that to the attention of their Republican colleagues, and even to the attention of the President of the United States prior to him making the recommendation. And that's really an important point that gets lost in all the noise, is that if you thought Kavanaugh was not fit for office, fit for the Supreme Court, fit for the nomination, and you had this credible allegation prior to the president making his decision, I think that was incumbent upon the Democrats, if they truly cared about this issue and Dr. Blasey Ford, to bring that to the attention of the president, such that these investigations could have gone on long before. Maybe he would have made a different choice in terms of his nominee. But now that the nomination's been made and we got to the 11th hour, the allegations surfaced against the wishes, I think, of Dr. Blasey Ford in terms of a public forum. It seemed that she wanted to keep this confidential. That could have been handled much, much better. And once it got to this 11th hour circus, if you want, it had the effect of polarizing the country. I have many Democrat friends that feel very, very strongly about Kavanaugh not rising to the Supreme Court bench, and I understand their passion. I disagree with them in terms of whether or not he's guilty. I can't sit here and tell everybody today that I think he's innocent or guilty. I believe, based upon what I saw, there's not nearly enough evidence to judge and say he in fact did that. There's credibility issues on both sides, but as we sit here today, there is not enough, in my opinion, to destroy his life in this nomination, and I think it should go forward, and the appropriate time to have thwarted it was when they first got these allegations 6 weeks ago.
So to bring it back to New Hampshire and Concord, I think what you're saying is they should have played by the rules.
I think so, and I think there's a significant amount of non-rule playing on both sides. And I know that a lot of my Democrat friends on the other side of the aisle are just as angry about Merrick Garland in terms of his nomination being held up in the final year of Barack Obama's presidency. And I can see why there's anger there, but I don't know that necessarily translates into, well, our nominee was held up, so therefore character assassination, if that's what this was being engaged in here, is the right way to go ahead and get that revenge. I wish that both parties played by the rules. I think they both do things to one another that causes this tit for tat. And eventually, I'm hoping that adults in the room step up and we're brought back to what the Senate should be doing, which is really where the lack of craziness should be found. That's what the House of Representatives is for. So the Senate usually is where you find the moderates and the deal making, and I'd like to see us go back to that at some point in time. But as it stands right now, as a voter first and as your state rep second, I was pretty upset in terms of the treatment that Judge Kavanaugh received, and I hope that he does get confirmed because from what I can tell, this doesn't look like it was a fully credible allegation after it was researched by the FBI, and no one else at the party can confirm it happened. So I just hope whatever we do here, we get it right.
Great. So to bring it back locally, what issues are in Concord that will have a meaningful effect on us in Bedford? And then what might you introduce for legislation that will have a positive effect on our community?
Well, I've been a big supporter of educational choice. It's been a real hot button issue the last few years here, and we had a bill that I'm sure folks at home can remember that essentially enabled folks to take some of the money that would have gone with their children through the public system, to take that money, free it from the public education system, and allow the parent to utilize that money as a small amount. I think it was $3,000 by the time it came out of finance, to put towards a private school or a charter school of their choice. And so that bill ended up failing, unfortunately, at the 11th hour. But in terms of how that impacts us locally, I think we've had a recent example of a hot button issue here in Bedford with regard to the unfortunate decision by former school administrator Chip McGee to go and testify on behalf of the Exeter guidance counselor who pled guilty to pedophilia and unfortunately raping that teenage I think it was a girl and now boy in transition. That was really poor judgment. I know a lot of parents have reached out to me personally. I was personally happy with Chip McGee's decision to step aside, but now I see a situation in which parents have asked for their children not to be in the classroom with teachers that were outspoken in support of the former guidance counselor. and the school district is not going to go and accommodate those requests any further. And I think that's an unfortunate decision, but at the same time, it just goes to show you that, school choice is important, So if there was some vehicle for those parents to then take the money that would have been applied through their taxes towards their child's public education, they would have that bill, which didn't pass, to then go and put it towards an alternative education at another school. School choice is incredibly important. It's not to say that we don't have a strong public school system here in Bedford, because we have one of the best in the state. But that education doesn't always meet the needs of every student. And there are some schools, whether it be smaller classrooms or different types of programs, I'm a big fan of the charter schools and the alternative forms of education that they have, that might meet the needs of these students better. So school choice is a really, it's a fundamental issue for me to see that we get that passed. And that's a major reason why I'm running for re-election, is to be part of that effort, hopefully increase our majority. We'll see what happens, but get enough Republican and even a few more Democrat votes to bring that across the finish line.
Very sympathetic to the school choice issue. I have two children, 11 and 13, and they're sailing into the squalls right now of the high school. So for me, I think it's important that people have an alternative and not have their money essentially owned by a monopoly. So I agree with that position entirely. Can we just talk a little more about local issues? What is the mechanism for the state to support continued maintenance on 101? And I think New Boston Road is a state road. There have been quite a few complaints about the condition of New Boston Road. I think a lot of traffic has been channeled in that direction off 101. What is the ability of our local group of politicians, our elected officials, to go to Concord and make sure that we have enough capital to maintain those main roads?
Well, all of this is my Candidate's Corner interview. The best thing you could do in terms of what's best for Bedford 101 and making sure that that gets wrapped up as soon as possible, and we have sufficient state resources to maintain it and make sure that we don't using Liberty Hill or New Boston as pass-throughs, is re-elect my friend John Graham, who has been a longtime member of the Transportation Committee, was the chair for a very, very long time as well. And I believe he's Assistant Majority Leader right now. But John Graham, is, in terms of transportation and roads and being an advocate for the 101 widening, you couldn't find a better ally for the town of Bedford. And obviously, you want to vote for the rest of the slate, because we'll be there to vote with John in terms of Bedford's interests on the 101 issue. So, but John's been a tireless advocate for seeing that project through, and I'm sure if given the chance with re-election, he'll make sure that it's completed in a timely fashion and that we get the maintenance funds that we need. But he's really been the roads guy from our slate of 7 state reps that we have up in Concord.
That's what I understand. John's a big fan of infrastructure.
Yep.
If you could tell voters, what is the most important issue that you voted on in your 4-year term?
Most of
you can give top 3 if you want, but
it's a difficult call. That's probably over 2,000 bills that I voted on in my 4 years in Concord. Not all of them are obviously life and death. Not all of them are partisan, but there's a number of them I think that are very, very important. One issue that I'm very, very passionate about is number one is the issue of Medicaid expansion. I've been fighting Medicaid expansion pretty aggressively the last few terms, and my friends on the left accuse us sometimes of not having a heart. But I've seen the effects of what the Medicaid expansion program can do to people that are looking for a job, looking for a way to rise up. And Medicaid expansion is an expansion of Medicaid. It covers not people that are below the poverty line or people that are infirmed. It covers able-bodied adults 18 to 65 that can get a job, but are just looking for a hand up. The problem is that the mechanism stops abruptly at 138% of the poverty line. So if you're stacking shelves at Target part-time, right? And someone comes in and offers you a nice full-time job, you're jumping from maybe making $14,000, $15,000 a year to $28,000 a year at a new job. Maybe you're going to, go work at a desk job for a law firm or something. The immediate impact of taking that position cuts off your benefits entirely. It's not a step approach where, we'll wean you off this, we'll cover 75% and then 50%, 25% and so on. You're immediately cut off. So I've seen cases where individuals can't take a job making more money because things like Medicaid expansion get cut off and they lose their coverage for themselves and they can't replace it at dollars that make sense at the new salary. So in my opinion, the program as it's currently written walls people into poverty, and that's not what government programs are meant to do. They're meant to be an assistance out of poverty. But unfortunately, the way that this is structured is a mechanism to keep folks confined in poverty, and I will rail against that every single day. The other issue is that, and again, I don't want to go and lash out at my own in terms of Republicans, but Republicans in the Senate, along with all the Democrats in the Senate, built a program surrounding Medicaid expansion in which they're claiming that they're not using any of your tax dollars or they're not using your insurance premiums to fund the program. That's patently false. What they're doing is they're laying the bill at the foot of the hospitals. The hospitals, though, then go and get higher reimbursement levels from the insurance companies. The insurance companies turn around and raise your premiums. It is a fact. But the way that they have this skewed, their messaging comes across as though, oh, Medicaid expansion is free for all, it's federally funded. It's not fully federally funded. And the federal government continues to wean down that level of support. So at the end of the day, we all say we want to lower everybody's insurance premiums, but they're going up as a result of the fact that we've got programs like Medicaid expansion that are like partially funded by my insurance costs, your insurance costs. Anybody that's paying for their own insurance is paying the cost of that Medicaid expansion program. And I think that's patently unfair.
We have the second highest per capita medical costs in the country.
And Medicaid expansion has a significant amount to do with that. The other thing that has to do with that is we have a lot of mandates. New Hampshire has 44 mandates on the books that we put in addition to the federal government. Things like diabetic preventative care. I understand it's done with the right intentions, but cost sometimes seems to be a distant priority. And it's unfortunate. I don't think we're making strides in the right direction on healthcare, regardless of the administration that's in place. I'd like to see that change, and we'll continue to fight for that in my third term.
Excellent. So the election coming up, I think, is in 33 days.
Yep.
On November 6th, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. at the high school.
I'll be there all day, rain or shine. So.
I will be there with you. And very important that people understand to vote all the way down the ticket. Don't stop at governor, Congress,
yes.
state senator. Vote all the way down the ticket, because there are a lot of votes that are foregone at the Republican State House level because people just want to check
Yes.
real quick and leave. So
So certainly for my Republican friends out there, my independent friends that vote Republican, and even some of the Democrats out there that vote Republican sometimes, it's very, very important to remember that we lose about 1,000 plus votes between the top of the ticket race and the bottom of the ticket race. And if you like the governor and you want to assist the governor, it's very, very important that you take that extra minute or 2 minutes to go all the way down the ballot, circle in all 6 state rep choices for Bedford, and then obviously fill in the oval for the Floterial district, which is Representative Sanborn's. That's Amherst and Bedford. But you need to go all the way down the ballot, because if you elect Governor Sununu again, but then you handcuff him in terms of not going through the entire Republican roster, he won't be able to get some of the things that you've enjoyed this past term accomplished. But again, very important, fill out all 6 ovals on the Republican slate for state reps, so go all the way down that ballot.
that's great. I know you work very hard. You work hard at your business. You work hard with your family.
Mm-hmm.
But you spend an enormous amount of time in the State House.
Yep.
People have no idea. It's supposed to be a part-time job. Sometimes I think you've got really 3 full-time jobs: family, your business and a state rep.
Yeah, no, some of it's my own fault. I signed up for the Commerce Committee. So Commerce this year set the record for most bills reviewed, I believe, ever up at the State House. We were 1,000 bills that came through the Commerce Committee, and it can be really trying at times. It's 3 days up at the State House to be on the Commerce Committee, and then 1 day a week for session days. So. It can be a balance, and admittedly, I am not able to make every single vote. I'm right around the average of about 75, 72% of the time I'm able to make it, but they pay us $100 a year, so we all have to go find our income somewhere else, but I do make it for the big ticket items, and I make it as much as I can and try the best that I can. But as you know, between January and May, it's almost a 4-day-a-week job up there, and again, we all do the best that we can. But I wouldn't change the New Hampshire legislature for all the money in the world. I think the fact that we're essentially elected volunteers making $100 means that what you get for your mix up at the State House are folks from all walks of life, all backgrounds, and you have business owners working with, carpenters, foremen, folks that work at Starbucks. There was even a couple unemployed folks that were up there last time. Pensioners, a lot of retirees up there as well. So you get all walks of life, and everybody can run. And it's really important, I think, that we maintain that, and I think we will. But you look at Massachusetts, and they're making $90,000 a year down there, pension for life after serving for like a term. They have the wrong priorities down here. I think everybody in New Hampshire does it for the right reasons, Republican and Democrat, and I champion that going forward.
That's great. Well, thank you very much for your time, Bart.
Yeah, thank you for taking the time out of your day, and appreciate it.
Thank you for representing us.
Yeah, no problem. It's my pleasure, and hopefully the good voters of Bedford will send me back for another 2 years. But remember, November 6th, vote for your Republican team. Let's keep this economy rolling. Vote for Governor Sununu, and let's bring this home. So I thank you for your support, and I'll see you out in the campaign trail.